you didn't serve in the National Army, why do you call yourself a Singaporean? There was one comment to say I look like a Filipino waiter. I have to say that I don't like being called a Singaporean. I'm Leo Caballes. I'm originally from the Philippines. I moved to Singapore 16 years ago. It's been that long. I am in the business of taking care of people. I work for a multinational company that gives me a lot of scope to meet people from all over the world. Contrary to what other people think, I don't really like to travel that much. I also love to meet strangers. I have a lot of strangers turned into friends, and that has really enriched my life a lot. Apart from that, I have to say that I am Singapore's #1 fan. I am introvert. I generally prefer smaller groups, maybe around 4 to 6 people, because in that way I can talk to each one of them more at a deeper level, rather than larger groups where I generally feel a bit tired and exhausted after mingling with everyone else. I don't go out and play in the streets as much as the other kids do in the Philippines when I was still there. I would be happy to play with a few playmates in the house, with my figurines, with my G.I. Joe, with my robots, with my Voltron, if you guys know what that is. I want to show you this picture of me as a child holding the cord of the electric fan and using it as a microphone. So when I was a kid, I would be asked to recite a poem or sing a song. So I used this as a way to practice for those. I have to say that the upbringing of Filipinos is really more around strong family ties and being hospitable. So I have taken that with me when I grew older and when I moved to a different country. I am very fortunate that the company that I was working in back then had an opportunity in our Singapore regional office to be part of our HR team there. But I wasn't sure whether it was easy to make friends, being alone and not knowing anyone apart from my real estate agent who helped me find my first home. Honestly, I wanted to go to Australia because it took me 2 years to get over Australia after spending half a year there, and I wanted to explore being a permanent resident in Australia. I had no expectations about living in Singapore, and I think that is what made it all the more beautiful for me, that the more I immersed myself in the culture and the environment, the more I realized that it was the right decision to make. During my first few months in Singapore, I deliberately wanted to explore and understand more about the country. What town is next to which town? Where are the malls located? How do people live their daily life? So what I did was I just took random buses. Random buses meaning that I will go to a bus stop, whatever bus comes along, not knowing where it will end up in. And I then came to realize, oh, I didn't know that Bugis is not so far away from Orchard Road. So it was a great way for me to know the country and get to see people as they hop on and off. When I was going around Singapore, the initial impression I had is that I want to live here. I want to live here for a long time. Singapore has a lot of races, and that is one thing I had to adjust with. Coming from the Philippines, we hardly have a lot of mixed in terms of races. And one thing that I had to adjust was the language, because I didn't know how to speak any of the local languages. I didn't know how to speak Mandarin, Tamil, Bahasa. I only spoke Tagalog and English. But eventually, I met friends who were very kind and they spoke English. And whenever they spoke in the local language, they would translate it for me so that it all made sense and I can be involved in the conversation. And I know that by being friends with the locals, I will really immerse myself in the environment and get to really know how Singapore works. So I really found ways. I joined organizations, I joined groups, I met up with Singaporeans who then introduced me to more Singaporeans. And that really made my circle grow bigger, to a point that if I'm offered a job overseas, I'll have to think twice or thrice because I don't want to leave more than 90% of my friends behind because they're all from here. Back in 2006, barely a few months into Singapore, a friend of mine asked me, "Do you want to join the NDP preview?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." Within the first few hours, I really felt some electrifying feeling. And during that time, I knew that I really wanted to stay in Singapore because there is a high sense of national pride. So, sometimes Singaporeans would say, "Oh, Singapore is too small, it's too boring, I want to live abroad." I'd like to believe that it is true, it's small, but Singapore is not Singapore. There's always something to do here. But I have to say that I don't like being called a Singaporean. I would prefer to be called a Singapore citizen. In my view, native Singaporeans should be called Singaporeans. So I came in as an employment pass, I applied to be a permanent resident, and I waited based on the guideline before applying to be a Singapore citizen. And it took me about 18 months of wait before I received a letter from the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority to say that your application for citizenship has been approved. Since Singapore does not allow dual citizenship, I have to renounce my citizenship from the Philippines. So it just tells you that I am no longer a Filipino citizen. After several months, they will give me my certificate of Singapore citizenship, and this is how it looks like. So it would have my IC number and all the other personal particulars. And at the end of the day, we were all celebrating because that letter is just very life-changing for me. Singlish. I bought a dictionary so that I can learn about Singlish. So it's not easy. Until now, I have not been able to distinguish when do you say la, lo, lor, and all of that. Singapore has a very diverse culture. There is celebration all year round to honor and recognize the different cultures within the country. So one cultural difference is that the language. You go to a different part of Singapore, you hear a different language, which is very interesting. In the Philippines, there is a national language, but there are different dialects. But unless you go to that part of the Philippines, then you won't get to really hear that dialect. But in Singapore, within 10 minutes, I hear a different language, which is very interesting. But apart from that, I think there are a lot of similarities in the culture. It has not really been smooth sailing all along, especially when I entered the world of social media, that people would have always strong opinions about Filipinos in Singapore or foreigners in Singapore in general. People say that foreigners are here to steal jobs from Singaporeans. The second one is, there was one comment to say I look like a Filipino waiter. And then some people say that you didn't serve in the National Army, why do you call yourself a Singaporean? When I received those xenophobic comments on my social media, I was irritated. That was the first feeling, because why would people say this, right? And then the second thing is that then I reflected, maybe I said something wrong, maybe I did, or maybe I did not. The other thing that went through my mind is that they have nothing better to do. Right? So why would they really waste their energy commenting on me? There's so many people, why me? But I just learned to accept that there are people who just are not satisfied with everything about Singapore. I can't change the way they feel about the world. So if they feel that way about foreigners, then the only thing I can do is to behave properly, right? To behave in accordance with how Singaporeans view to be behaving the right way. For Singaporeans, they are very future-focused. Sometimes you get too immersed with the work that you don't care much about what happens outside of work because all you do is working. For the Philippines, the Filipinos love to be able to have a good balance between working hard and playing hard. There's a little bit of fun element to it. And even in the Philippines, if people are not well-to-do, or they have some financial constraints, they can still be happy. So maybe that's something to learn from. In my view, Singapore is the perfect imperfect country. I wish for the Singaporeans to continue to have an open mind about having different types of people in Singapore. I know that this diversity has proven to be an advantage for Singapore, and it will continue to be. The second advice and hope that I have is that Singaporeans should be more grateful for where they are in their life in Singapore, because you don't want to go out of Singapore to be grateful and look back to say, I should have just stayed in Singapore. If we want to be happy, we should just get focused on what is our purpose in life and how do we get there without comparing ourselves with other people. That way, you will not go into any bitterness about other people getting opportunities or being happier than you are. That's how I live my life. They always say the grass is greener on the other side, but sometimes you just have to water your patch, right? And make it greener than what you think it is. My name is Leo Caballes, and I am a Singapore citizen.